And it's BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. My guest on the program today is Brian Davis. He is the host of the Tate LaBianca radio program, and he's also featured in the documentary Manson, The Final Words. And for once, I am finally able to say the Dr. Peppers are cracking, the espresso shots are flowing along with the Grande Black. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ned. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction, my friend.
You're welcome. Now, Brian, out of curiosity, how many years have you followed the Tate LaBianca murders and the stories of Charles Manson, the family, and everyone associated with the case?
Yes. Well, we've all heard the case probably throughout our lives, but I've actually started to get into the case, as you say, followed the case in 2005 is when I seriously got involved in this. And I started the radio program in 2011, I think it was. So it was a few years after that I got into it that I even launched the radio program. So, but yeah, I've been in it since 2005.
And what first made you not only curious about Charles Manson and the family and the Tate LaBianca murders, but want to pursue this to the level that you have?
I think what made me develop the passion that I have in pursuing it at the level I have is when I got into it seriously and I found out all of the prosecutorial misconduct that went on in the trial. And then I saw the evidence that, or alleged evidence, I should say, that Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor of the trial in the case, had presented for Manson in the conspiracy charge. I didn't even think they had enough evidence for the conspiracy charge to begin with, much less the trial. But when I saw what happened in the trial, that's what got me upset. That's what got me almost on a personal level. I had to pursue this because I felt the injustice. And not that I support Charles Manson. I think anyone that listens to me or knows me knows that I don't support Charlie Manson, but I do support Charles Manson's rights. And I didn't see that happening in that trial.
Yes, and on the Tate LaBianca radio program, you frequently refer to Vincent Bugliosi as the Bug. Would you like to give us an example of something that he did wrong in the trial?
Well, there's I think coaching witnesses, for example, I can tell you there's a couple of witnesses that came in the trial that day of testimony, and he out in the hallway basically telling them what to say before they get in there. There's things, and that's just little things like that. There was I believe the gag order that he violated, him and a couple others that the judge had put out. And then there was the situation with a subpoena and Linda Kasabian, and he had Steve K supposedly or allegedly ripped the subpoena up. And that's a no-no. I mean, there's just all kinds of things sprinkled throughout the trial in this whole case, in which the Bug, as I call him, was just that, a bug. And I'll tell you, like, another thing, for example, there was the him going out to the ranch, for example, and getting the permission from George Spahn to search the ranch. And number one, if you even look at that, he's outside of his boundaries, even acting as a detective working the case when he's the prosecutor. But nonetheless, he went out to the Spahn ranch to get the shell casings to try to match them with the casings at the scene of the crime. And he supposedly had George Spahn's permission. But when it came to court, all the tape got lost. They couldn't find the tape, or it got destroyed or something, they said. It's just things like that just kind of led me down that road to where the Bug isn't that honorable. And I just think in a trial, first-degree murder, you have to have a little something more, for me anyway, than circumstantial evidence. And not only did he not have the evidence, but he's taken all of these little shortcuts that really are, I think, illegal. I mean, I've talked to a couple of attorneys and they would agree with me. Some of these things I'm pointing out, they're not legal to do in a court. So I don't know what happened and all that. I don't know if the judge was in on it. I don't know how, I don't know how all that went on behind the scenes there, but it wasn't on the up and up, that's for sure. And okay, I was going to say a couple. No, I was just going to add on a couple other things that happened in the trial that upset me. Was the more or less the things the attorneys did even. So my ire isn't just for the bug, although that's where most of it is. It's enough to spread around for everybody in that case.
And for the listeners, would you like to provide a very basic introduction as to what happened with the Tate LaBianca murders, who was involved, and what it was the entire setting?
Well, sure. I mean, so the Tate LaBianca murders happened on August the 9th and 10th, overnight. And it's basically the family, Charles Manson's family, as they called themselves, or was labeled. A few of them, allegedly under Charles Manson's orders, went up to Cielo Drive, where a friend of his, Terry Melcher, had used to live, record producer and Doris Day's son. And it was Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Linda Kasabian went up to Cielo Drive that night, allegedly on Charlie's orders, and killed everybody on the property except for William Garrettson, the property keeper, if you will, the one that was looking after the property, while the owner of the property, Rudy Altobelli, was away. Rudy Altobelli rented the property to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. They were away in England, and while they were away, some friends of theirs were staying in the house. Abigail Folger, the heiress of the Folger Coffee Company, and her boyfriend, Wojtek Frykowski, and Jay Sebring was a frequent friend and visitor over there at Cielo as well. And he used to date Sharon Tate before Sharon married Roman Polanski. So he hung around the property a bit as well. And on that night, they were all up there. They had just come back, they had just come back from eating dinner, I guess, a few hours earlier there at the restaurant El Coyote. And they were getting ready for to retire for the night. I think Sharon was already in her bedroom, and Abigail was in her bedroom reading a book in bed. Jay and Wojtek were still up. In fact, both of them had their clothes on, their regular street clothes. And Wojtek, it looks like, had fallen asleep on the couch, and Jay went in the back to talk with Sharon for a little bit. And while that was going on, the murderers pulled up. They drove up to the telephone pole up there on Cielo. Tex got out, climbed the telephone pole, cut the phone wires. They went back down, parked the car, walked back up the hill. As they got over the gate, allegedly Stephen Parent, who was visiting the property caretaker, William Garrettson, was coming down the driveway. He stopped to push the button on the gate to open the gate, and Tex Watson jumped out and killed him, shot him 4 times in the face, stabbed him or slashed at him with the knife, cut his wristwatch off, and the wristwatch flew in the back seat, and he was dead instantly. They then went up into the house, and longer story short, they killed everybody in the house. throughout the next, I guess, 45 minutes to an hour, probably. I don't know how long it took. No one does, I guess, but I'm just estimating based on the damage there that was done, the carnage. Probably took maybe 45 minutes or so to do all of that. There was a fight between Tex and Wojtek, a fight evidently between Tex. It looks like Tex and Jay Sebring. So they murdered everyone in the house except in that house or on the property, except for the caretaker, as I said, William Garrison. And there was even the visitor, Stephen Parent, who was visiting Garrison. He was murdered, as I just said. The next night, allegedly, Charlie Manson had said, I'll have to show you how to do it, or I'll show you how to do it. We're going out again tonight. So the next night they went out again. They drove around for several hours, at random, looking for places to either rob or people to kill, allegedly. They then, for some reason, drove over to Waverly Drive in Los Feliz, the neighborhood over there. And they went in and murdered a couple, the LaBianca couple, Lino and Rosemary. They had just come back from Lake Isabella. They had their son, Frank, with them, but Frank stayed an extra night at the lake. They had their daughter with them also, Susan LaBerge. They dropped her off at home, went to the newspaper stand. They then went home and they were getting ready to go to bed that night. And that's when the killer showed up. They went in and murdered the couple. They left. Well, actually, Charles Manson took the car along with whoever was in the car with him. It was Susan Atkins, Clem Grogan, and Linda Kasabian. Charlie Manson took the car and those passengers, and they left. They went to Selmar first, where they dumped everybody's heard the story, where they dumped the wallet that they took from Rosemary LaBianca. They dumped the wallet in the women's bathroom there. And they drove to Venice after that. And then Charlie made those people that he had in the car, Clem and Linda, and I guess Susan, made them walk home. He left them there. I thought that was kind of a funny part of the story. And then he went back to the ranch, and everybody else hitchhiked home that night. And that's it. That's how the murders went down for those 2 nights.
Okay, though, but that begs the question is, why were these murders committed?
And that's the $1 million question. I mean, that's another reason I got so into this case, Ned, because the motive, the official narrative, and if you hear me, I keep saying allegedly throughout the story, it's because I don't believe the official narrative. I don't believe the official motive, and that is Helter Skelter. That's what this whole motive is, according to Vince Bugliosi, the Bug. Charlie Manson was acting on Helter Skelter, a race war, and was confirmed to him by the Beatles songs on the White Album. That's what he got over to the jury. It was incredible, but it was all bullshit, in my opinion. We can say bullshit, right?
Yes, we can. And about this Helter Skelter race war, this idea that Charles Manson had this type of master plan, and even to take his followers out into the desert and live in a bottomless pit and grow the numbers to 144,000. Now, one person who used to be close to Charles Manson was Paul Watkins. And in his book, he tells all these stories of Charles Manson talking about Helter Skelter in the race war and saying that, oh, yeah, we're going to go out into the desert and we're going to put machine guns on our dune buggies. And he presented that as a factual account of the story, saying that, oh, yeah, everything we heard in the official narrative, it's true. He didn't say those exact words, but you see where I'm going with that. He's corroborating Vince Bugliosi's story. What's your response to that?
Not only did he didn't, let's get it straight. He didn't corroborate Vince's story. Vince took his story and used it. That's where this whole thing. Paul Watkins is where this whole stupid shit started, if you ask me. I mean, this is where it all started, this whole stupid Helter Skelter bullshit. Here's how this works, Ned. So there was a church next to the ranch out there at the time, the Krishna Venta Church. I forget the name of it, the People's Fountain or whatever, Fountain of the World or something. And Paul Watkins was used to go over to that church for the music programs that they had there. And in a sense, he kind of introduced the family to that church, and Manson and the girls used to go over there and participate in programs and exchange philosophies and talk with people and so forth. And that whole race war, that whole Helter Skelter race war idea is the Krishna Venta's idea, really. That's where it all started, and that's the church gave Paul Watkins that idea. Paul comes over to the ranch and starts talking about this Helter Skelter that's coming down. Now, when I say Helter Skelter, not that particular word, because that wouldn't come into play until the Beatles put the album out. But the whole idea of the race war and this going to the desert and all of this nonsense he's talking, that came from that church. And in my opinion, I think it made some good storytelling around the campfire for Charles Manson. I think he came up with these great ideas. Was Helter Skelter talked about around the ranch? Yes, it probably, without a doubt, was. There's no question. There's too much corroboration for that. But in the sense of it being a motive for murdering, I don't think it was like that. I think Charlie probably did talk about it in a sense of fantasy, in a sense of some good storytelling. And, you know, I do it. Well, I think me and my friends used to do it all the time about what we would do if we were ruler of the world, you know. But that's where that started. Paul Watkins gave that, I think that whole story with Helter Skelter and all of that, I think that's where they all got it from. Not only Vince Bugliosi, but the authors back then that were out there. Ed Sanders, for example, he talked with Paul Watkins. I mean, Paul Watkins was right there telling anybody that would listen that this was all Helter Skelter related and so forth. The Bug took it and ran with it.
Okay, though, but I've also had Mark Hewitt on the program in the past, and he is the author of Charles Manson Behind Bars, and he believes that there is more of a conventional narrative that has been established, and he agrees with it, that Charles Manson more or less instructed people to commit these murders because he was very mad at Terry Melcher. He thought that he got cheated out of the record contract, and it's it's like perhaps the most famously known motive for that he just sent them to go to the house because it was a revenge act. I mean, partially against Terry Melcher, but kind of just a revenge against society for getting cheated out of a record deal. Is he right or wrong?
Absolutely wrong. I mean, first of all, there's no evidence to support that. I would love to hear the evidence. I've talked with Mark a couple times about that. I said, what's the evidence? He has nothing. What is the evidence? Do you know it? Tell me the evidence, Ned. Do you know?
Yes, during the Ronald Reagan Jr. interview, Charles Manson does say, got to understand, those people were killed because Terry Melcher broke a contract and he didn't do some things with music that he said he was going to do. That's just the absolute first thing that has come to mind. And
okay, so let's look at that for a minute. Terry Melcher visited the ranch after.
Yes.
You know, there's like
yes.
there was no. Yeah. I'm saying that he was already at the ranch after all of this happened with the music. Let's go back for a second under this notion that Charles Manson wanted to be a musician, a rock star, or whatever the term is. Have you ever heard the clip of Charles Manson in the studio at Dennis Wilson's or wherever the recording was taking place? I don't think it was Dennis Wilson's studio.
No.
But have you ever heard
No,
that clip?
I've not.
So there's a clip of Charlie Manson in the studio. He sounds very nervous. He sounds very unfamiliar with the equipment. He sounds, and Dennis is in the background trying to coax him on. Come on, Charlie, you can do it, man. Come on, baby. And Charlie is very tentative, very, oh, well, hold on, man. Hold on, man. Just give me a minute, man. What is this thing? What is this? I don't even think Charlie wanted to be a rock star or a musician, a mainstream musician, or any of that kind of nonsense. I don't think that was his ambition. I think he just loved to play guitar. I think he loves to sing. He doesn't care if he's making money at it or not. And Dennis, I think, tried to get him into that. And once he had a taste of it, I don't think he even wanted any part of that, in my opinion. I don't think there was any big ambition for Manson to become a rock star or musician or pop star or whatever you want to term it. So I don't think there was any revenge against Melcher. The thing I heard Manson say a couple of times, I know the Reagan interview very well, but even if Melcher had broken some promises, there was no contract broken, that's for sure, because Melcher didn't have any contract with Manson. I know Manson has said Terry Melcher broke a lot of promises to some people. Notice Manson didn't say he broke promises to me. He said he broke promises to some people, broke some contracts to some people. I don't think he meant himself. And they maintained some type of a friendship. I say that's false also because even if Charlie was talking that quote that you brought up, it doesn't say that there was a motive for him to tell people to go murder him. And also they knew where he lived. So why wouldn't they just go out to Malibu and send a message to him personally? Why would they go to where he used to live?
Well, I can give you the stuff that you'll hear on like ABC 2020. I can give you their answer.
Yeah.
And then I can also just add like a type of follow-up, because I'm going to share this story as I learned it, but you can correct me if any of this is untrue or wrong. Charles Manson also did talk about a story that there was a mobile recording studio that was sent to the Spawn Ranch so Charles Manson could, again, have another take at recording his music. And 3 people who were working the mobile recording studio were Orientals, as Charlie describes them as, and that they were doing drugs, and one of them just absolutely freaked out and tripped out, and he thought that Charles Manson was the devil, and he grabbed a tool and just came at him and was just trying to really physically hurt him. And Bruce Davis and one of the other members of the family just had to subdue the guy. And Charles Manson interpreted that as Terry Melcher sent somebody to kill him. So once again, this is like a type of revenge plot.
That was the guy you're talking about. He wasn't an Asian. He was the actual engineer that was running that mobile unit, and he was there with Terry Melcher. And the premise behind that was that since Manson wasn't comfortable in the studio, let's take the mobile unit out there and let's record him in his natural setting, and let's just not make it about music. Let's make it a documentary style of record, like project that we're going to do. Let's make it like that, where we show everything about the lifestyle that he's living and the way that they're living at the ranch. And that was the purpose of that particular shooting that you're talking about, that shot that you're talking about. There was but the actual person that you're talking about, the engineer himself, was not Oriental, was not Asian. He was American, and he was the one running the mobile unit. His name was he runs a church right now out in Texas. His name's coming. It's on the tip of my tongue and it escapes me, Ned. I apologize.
You must have heard that soundbite when Charles Manson's saying Terry Melcher sent 3 Orientals with hatchets.
Yeah, to shut that chamber down. Yeah. But yeah. the guy, I think his name was the name Steve. I know this like the back of my hand, and yet it's for some reason I'm coming up blank right here, Ned. But it'll hit me here in a second. No, it'll hit me here in a second, I'm sure, and I'll just blurt it out. But
Brian.
But there was the guy that was running the whole thing, the engineer that was running that mobile unit. He was tripping on Mike Deasy. That's his name. Mike Deasy is the guy's name. M-I-K-E, Mike Deasy, D-E-A-S-Y. Mike Deasy was running that mobile unit you're talking about. He was tripping on acid so bad that, yeah, he thought Charlie was some type of a freak, some type of a bad guy, devil type of guy. He did. He said that, yes. And he had a bad reaction to that LSD. And yeah, there was going to be a fight there. There was a fight. Charlie was getting down with them, and Bruce had to, I think Bruce or Clem had to jump in. Yes. But that was the story behind that. That's the real story behind that, Ned. That's simple. As simple as that. Like, that's what happened. He tripped out on the acid and got in a fight. That's it.
Okay, though, but I said I would share just kind of like the conventional.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. That's right. You're right, and that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing more or less the official narratives that we've heard. And as we get into this, I hope to tell everyone what I think the real narratives are.
Sure. Because firstly, I mean, the stuff you've been talking about, Charlie, in the mobile recording studio, I mean, I would cite Stephanie Harlow's channels where I heard the story for the first time that Charles Manson, as you said, was a guitar player, and he was, used to playing and singing around the campfire and so on. But once he actually got to the recording studio, he had to stand a certain way, he had to be in front of the microphone a certain way, and he didn't really like that. So that's why they sent the mobile recording studio out. But about the motive for the Tate LaBianca murders, I mean, I think it was even Diane Sawyer doing the presentation on this when they say that the house at Cielo Drive wasn't necessarily about Terry Melcher. It's just Charles Manson thought of that house as the symbol of the establishment. And he just wanted to kill everybody in the house and didn't care who was there, because he made this type of connection in his mind that is the source of my problems. That's what's cheated me out of this music career. And I always thought that just sounded so weird, because like the house is the symbol. I mean, like, you're not going to go after Terry Melcher. You don't even necessarily know who might be there. And like, I mean, crazier things have happened, but that's just kind of bizarre to me.
It is. And again, I say that if it's a personal vendetta against Melcher, why not go to Malibu and get him, send the message yourself to him personally, like kill him or whatever you got to do to him. But I'm saying, why not do it to him directly? Why would you go to where he used to live? And remember, he had moved out of there, I don't know, like 8 months earlier. So it just seems to me it's ridiculous to think that Charlie was going to use that house as a symbol to send a message to Terry and everybody else, the establishment or whatever it was, whoever he was mad at. I'm just going to use that house. And it's like, why would, if you think about it, if I'm Charlie Manson, why would Terry Melcher care is what I'm thinking. Why would he care at that point? Why, if I go to his old house? Like, I don't know. I just think it, as you said, I just think it's ridiculous of a notion. And then on top of that, what is the evidence to show that that's what Charlie was thinking or doing? See, to me, you got to have the evidence, man.
Okay, though, but what do you think about the theory that the motive for the Tate LaBianca murders was a drug deal gone wrong?
Well, we've got a little evidence there now to support, okay? Unlike this other bullshit of, oh, Charlie hated society. He wanted to send a message to the establishment, so he chose the Melcher house and went up there and had everybody kill everybody. Okay, well, see, there's no evidence for that. There's a little bit of evidence for this drug thing now, and I'll tell you how this works. So there's a guy named Eugene Massaro. You ever heard that name?
Yes.
Okay. Eugene Massaro then, as you know, was Tex Watson's drug dealer and friend. And he was also a crime partner of another guy named Joe Rostow. If you haven't heard of Joe Rostow, it's because Vince Bugliosi doesn't mention Joe Rostow. But the police report of this case does. And in that police report, Joe Rostow tells the detectives that, yes, he admitted Joe Rostow was up there that night himself. He admitted he was up there that night delivering drugs to the people in the house, namely Wojtek Frykowski and Jay Sebring. Not only did he say this to the police, he told, well, let me go back. Let me back up a minute. Joe Rostow, the guy I'm talking about that was delivering drugs to the house that night, Joe Rostow was also dating a woman named Charlene McCaffrey. Charlene McCaffrey was Jay Sebring's receptionist. So after the murders happened, Joe Rostow confided or told his girlfriend, Charlene McCaffrey, that he was up there that night selling drugs to Wojtek Frykowski and Jay Sebring. She, in turn, told the police that. So they talked to Joe Rostow. Rostow admitted, yes, I told my girlfriend that I was up there that night, but really I wasn't. I just told her that to try to impress her, is what he told the police. So the connection here is, well, first of all, I believe that he was up there. I believe what he told his girlfriend was the truth, that he was up there. He didn't have to impress her. She already knew who he was. They had gotten arrested together back in April of 1969 when somebody broke into their apartment and tried to rob them. And Joe Rostow got shot in the foot. They called the police, and the police arrested Joe Rostow because he had drugs and jewelry and all kinds of stolen goods in his apartment. So they actually arrested him for calling the police of a robbery that had been committed against him. It's very, very weird. But anyway, so Charlene McCaffrey had already been with Joe Rostow for many months at that point. So there was, excuse me, there was no reason to, quote, impress her. So I believe what he told her was true. I believe he was up there that night selling drugs. And he admitted to knowing both Frykowski and Sebring anyway. So they had already had previous relationships. And I assume they were over drugs. So if you believe that Joe Rostow was up there that night selling drugs, here's the connection. Because now you can also plausibly believe that maybe Tex Watson found out about that drug deal going up there that night by the common denominator, the friend they had in common, Eugene Massaro. So Eugene Massaro is Joe Rostow's crime partner. Eugene Massaro is also Tex Watson's drug dealer and friend. So it's not a stretch for me to think maybe in a conversation, Eugene Massaro let out the information that there's going to be a drug deal up at Cielo Drive on that Friday night. And Tex Watson said, oh, well, thanks for the info, so to speak. And he filed that away until that Friday night. And he was going to go up there and rob Rostow of those drugs and or money. So that would make more sense to me because there's some evidence there. The evidence being that Rostow knew Massaro because they were crime partners, and Massaro knew Watson. Now, I don't know if Joe Rostow knew Tex Watson or not personally, but I know that Rostow and Massaro were crime partners, and I know that Massaro and Watson were friends, and Massaro was Tex Watson's drug dealer. I know that much. So with that information, you can maybe, put together that Watson got some information from Massaro that Rostow was going to go up there and sell some drugs that night. And Watson was just waiting for Friday night to go up there and rob everybody. Now, while that's going on, you got another thing happening at the same time. Over here on this side of the fence, you got Bobby Beausoleil, who had just, about a week earlier, a week or 10 days earlier, murdered Gary Hinman. And then he took off and got arrested because he got pulled over and they found the knife, the murder weapon, in the tire well of the car that Bobby Beausoleil was driving. So they arrested him for the murder of Gary Hinman. That Friday of the murders, that Friday that Friday morning, I guess, of the murders, Bobby Beausoleil called the ranch and he told the girls you better do something and get me out of here, or else I'm gonna start talking. And that set everybody in a panic. So the girls came up with this idea of a copycat murder to get Bobby out of jail so he wouldn't, start talking. And that's where the girls and Tex Watson intersect. Because I believe the girls was talking to Watson because Linda Kasabian was at that time with Tex Watson. And I believe the girls, and it might have been Linda herself. There is some rumor. I don't know how true this is. So I classify it as rumor. I don't necessarily believe it, but it's really possible. There's rumor from some of the girls like Sandy and I think Gypsy, Catherine Scher said this, that Linda came up with the idea of the copycat murder. It was her idea. So if that's true, I can see where Tex Watson would get involved because Linda and Tex were together at that time. They were actually, hanging with each other at the ranch during her time there. So if Linda came up with that idea of the copycat murder, I could see where she would involve Tex. So if Tex is going up to Cielo on a Friday night to bust a drug deal and the girls talk to him in the meantime and say, well, we need to come up with a copycat murder plan, I could see where they could work together. And Cielo would be the perfect spot because that's where Tex is going. And there's drug dealers up there. And just like Bobby and Gary, it was a drug deal. That's what the murder of Gary Hinman was over. So this would be a perfect copycat scenario if that's what was going on. And all of that makes much more sense than a race war breaking out. and Charlie's got to save everybody over a race war. So there's just a little background right there that makes a little more sense than anything that the Bug put out. Did I make any sense there, Ned? Did that come across? Okay, because there's a lot of characters in that little part of it, but I didn't know how that came out.
Oh no, that was just fine. I followed everything that you were saying, and I would like to remind the audience that I'm talking to Brian Davis. He is the host of the Tate LaBianca radio program, and at this time, I would also invite you guys to put your ideas in the comments section down below. Is there a case that you would like featured on Black Box Online Radio? Is there a guest that you would like to have on this program? You can share anything you want in the comments section, and you can always hit the like button and subscribe, and feel free to go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But Brian, I started listening to the Tate LaBianca radio program in 2021, and you mentioned one name there, Linda Kasabian, and I know you have a lot of strong opinions about Linda Kasabian, so I have a two-part question for you. Who was she, and is she a good actor or a bad actor?
Linda Kasabian was, she came into the scene with her husband, Bob Kasabian. They were going to go on a trip and had a bunch of money. I think one of them, there was another guy, Bob Melton, too, a friend of theirs. One of them had come into an inheritance. They were going to go over to South America and hang out for a bit. And then they found out, or Linda found out that Bob didn't want her to go. So they got into like a fight about that and they split up, and Linda ended up going to the ranch through Catherine Scher, I believe it was, and another girl. I think, who was the other girl? I forget, but it was one of the Catherine Scher and another of the girls at the ranch found Linda down the spiral staircase, big old meeting place there that everybody went to and hung out. And because of the marital situation that was happening with Linda, she went back to the ranch with the girls, and that's how she came into the ranch, July the 4th, 1969. And in my opinion, Linda Kasabian was a bad actress. Bad, very bad.
Well, yes, but you talked about one possible scenario that would involve Linda Kasabian coming up with the entire idea
Hmm.
for the copycat murder. And you also told a story in this episode here about how there was a wallet that was taken from one of the crime scenes and hidden in the ladies' restroom. And that on the Tate LaBianca radio program, I heard you once say that you even thought that that wallet was taken and hidden not to blame it on African Americans like the conventional narrative was. It was something that Linda Kasabian had stolen because she wanted to come back for the money later on, and
Oh
just all
yeah.
types of deceptive things. But the reason I asked about her is she became a star for the prosecution, right?
Yes. Yeah. She was the star witness. She was the one that turned on everybody and told the story of what happened those 2 nights.
And if this were all her idea, would that just be like some type of cold-hearted, menacing plan? She came up with the idea for the murders, then just stabs everybody in the back. I shouldn't have said that, but betrays
Yeah.
all the family.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. Yep. But that's her. That's her in a nutshell. I mean, that's how she is. She was a cold human being, I think, in my opinion.
But Brian,
No.
to shift gears a little bit, there is a book out there called Chaos by Tom ONeal that a lot of
Hmm.
people in the BBOR audience have read, and I've talked about a lot of things from Tom ONeal here on this program, and I know you also have some strong opinions about that book. And Tom ONeal spent 2 decades working on it, and he
Hmm.
did some fascinating interviews with it, particularly his interview with Joe Rogan. That's the only episode of Rogan that I've watched twice, and I like the
Yep.
way Tom presents it. But would you like to provide an introduction to Tom ONeal's Chaos, and what do you think about it?
Man, I'll tell you, I like Tom for the most part. I mean, we've had our personal differences throughout the years for whatever reasons, but I've always respected Tom as far as the work he's done on his book and this case. I think Tom O'Neill's got the best research out there of anybody. I've got a few good interviews myself, but and some phone calls and so forth. But Tom has got the best I think overall he's got the best, the best research period of any of us out there. Um, with that being said, however, I do have some issues with him in the book because number one, I haven't heard an interview of his yet where he actually takes a side. Like he's not committed to anything. He wrote this great book, but he's not committed to backing it up like with anything that he personally believes. He just puts the stuff out there. He doesn't actually take a side. So I'm not really impressed by that. I think he should take a side, take a stand based on his own research because he's got the best research of any of us. So why wouldn't he take it? Why wouldn't he, make a definitive stand? I don't know. And then the only other issue I have with the book is he puts a lot of emphasis on the MK Ultra angle, which obviously there was an MK Ultra program and people did get unknowingly dosed with some LSD, but I don't think that had anything to do with the murders. Nothing. And he still, to this day, hasn't been able to explain how it does connect. So I ask you, Ned, how would it connect? How would the MK Ultra stuff that ONeal wrote about in the book, Chaos, how would that connect to the murders? Let's say it happened. Let's say everything that Tom ONeal talks about in that book of the MK Ultra angle, let's say all of that is true. They dosed up Charlie. They got him where he wanted him. Then what? Now, how does that translate? Are you telling me that the government programmed Charlie Manson to program other people to go kill? Is that what
Yes,
you're telling me?
yes, that would be the theory. That it's
Just think about that for a minute. Charlie Manson is programmed by the government to program other people to go kill people. That doesn't sound a little weird to anybody but me?
absolutely, it sounds weird, but it goes sort of like this, right? That you have the same psychiatrist working at the Haight-Ashbury Clinic that is also the psychiatrist for Jack Ruby and working with
Jolly
MKO,
West.
Dr. Jolly West, right? This is the stuff that Tom ONeal just loves to
Yeah.
I kind of
Yeah.
put in the forefront. And this whole thing that Project MK Ultra carried on into the clinics of San Francisco, doing these experiments on people, and it's the concept of creating a programmed killbot and a set of programmed killbots, like trying to use psychological warfare, experimenting with different types of mental techniques, and those things definitely did happen. I mean, like all types of cases of people experimenting with psychological issues throughout history, and some types of unethical ways, like Donald Ewan Cameron, the subject of the
Hmm.
sleeping, and doing bizarre mental experiments like that, let alone the stuff that the Russians were doing. But that's
Sure.
just it, that Charles Manson was more or less brainwashed or coerced into doing this in some ways, and then Charles Manson then brainwashed his followers to more or less turn them into killbot soldiers, so to speak. And
Yeah.
also the implanting of false memories. That's something else that Tom ONeal talks about from MK Ultra. Just confusing them to the point where they're just going along with this these orders, and they don't even necessarily comprehend it themselves. That is
Well,
what people are
you know,
saying now. I'm not saying I
as
believe
much.
that. You gave me a challenge.
No, and I don't either. As much as I think that that's confusing, I think what's confusing, Tom is doing the confusing by throwing this kind of bullshit out there with no real facts. And again, I challenge. What? So all of this is true. Where is it that it ties into the murders? Like, I don't see that connection still. I agree with what you're saying as far as the experiments go, but in this particular case, I just don't see where it ties in to the murders, especially both nights, the way it did. It just doesn't look like it has anything to do with any type of MK Ultra experiment here. These murders look like some stuff went down that went awry, such as a drug deal, or someone got information from someone else that a drug deal was happening, or so forth. But I don't see any connection, even if the MK Ultra stuff is true with Charlie and the girls. I don't see the connection of that to the murders themselves. That's all.
Okay, yes, and to your credit, one of the first episodes of the Tate LaBianca radio program that I heard was when you were discussing Chaos by Tom ONeal, and you're pointing out that, all right, he has lots of facts. He has lots
Yeah.
of information, all this stuff about Dr. Jolly West. Well, how do you go from the clinic in San Francisco to Cielo Drive? Like,
Right.
what is the significance of just stating, okay, well, Charles Manson was in the family and the Tate LaBianca murders, and then Dr. Jolly West and MK Ultra? He has lots of facts, and he, as you said, he presents the facts,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it's not everything is completely connected, meaning that MK Ultra planned the Tate LaBianca murders, and I don't even think Tom ONeal thinks that
I'm
MK
with you.
Ultra.
I don't think Tom believes it himself either. He's just putting it out there because it's what he's found out. It's what he's discovered.
And
I'm
that's
with you.
fair.
I think that's why he doesn't take a definitive stand.
Right. And do you think also he might be
Ask
coming
Tom
out of...
ONeal. Ask him. Ask Tom ONeal. Does he think the murders are from the government? Did MK Ultra order them, or not? MK Ultra order them, but did the government order the murders through, or did the government responsible for the murders through the MK Ultra program that supposedly was used on Charles Manson? Ask him any of this. He won't tell. He can't tell you. He doesn't tell you because he doesn't have a definitive stand.
Well, absolutely. That's what I was going to say next. I mean, I would love to talk to Tom ONeal, but I know his response to that because I've heard him say it in other interviews when
Yeah,
they asked him,
same here.
what is the motive for the Tate LaBianca murders? I can't tell you. I spent 20 years researching it,
Yeah,
and I can't tell you. What about the drug deal gone wrong? It's possible. I mean, it's possible, but I can't tell you. And it's just, like not quite there. So I know
right.
what he would say.
Yeah, I'm the same way with them. I know too. So, but I try to base my beliefs on this case. I try to base what I think on what evidence we do have. That's I literally try to keep it basic and to what we do know, and then try to make sense of that. Try to make the connections where it be, and I think it's just much more realistic to me. What happened is based on the lifestyle that they were living, as opposed to some type of belief or whatever they think that was happening with Manson and his problems with society or establishment or whatever. I think if you just look at the basics of this case, you can almost see how it came together without the sensationalism that they add to it.
But on that note, Charles Manson did also talk about something once as far as being angry at society. He said that Lena LaBianca was killed because of a black phone book that had all the phone numbers of people in the music industry from,
Yeah,
and you know exactly what I'm talking about. What is that
yeah.
story, and is it
I think
visible or not?
personally, I think that's a red herring because I used to buy into that way back in the beginning. I thought, oh my God, he's talking about this little black book. Nobody's picking up on this, man. This must be something, right? And, well, I looked into it even further, and I just don't see anything there as far as that goes. The story behind that little black book, by the way, is this. It goes to the story that Charlie confronted the business manager of the Beach Boys one day in the office, in his office. Charlie said he owed him some money, and the manager said, no, we don't owe you any money. Get out. And Charlie said, oh, you're going to pay me or else. And supposedly the guy said, the manager said back to Charlie, you know, if you don't get out, I'm going to call New York. And Charlie supposedly snapped back at him, call New York? I'll call New York. Meaning Charlie knew people in New York as well. Because Charlie took that as to mean the Beach Boys business manager was going to call the mafia guys on Charlie. Not just the police, but the mafia, right? That's how Charlie took that. So he's saying back to him, no, I'll call New York. I know a few people as well. And he thought that the business manager was going to call Leno LaBianca for some reason. Because the story went, Charlie tells it that he left and then he came back into the office and asked the secretary, who's he calling? Did he call? Who's he calling? And the secretary allegedly told Charlie he's calling Waverly, which meant Leno LaBianca. Now, I don't know. I've tried to contact that business manager for years. He's still alive, last I checked, but I could never get a reply back from him. I want to verify the story even took place, number one, that confrontation. And then number two, I don't know anymore that I believe the little black book because it makes no sense. And there was no little black book of Leno's. There was none, like never came to surface. Now, one thing I noticed about that story is this, Ned. Charles Manson never mentioned a little black book for years. So the murders happened in 1969. Charlie never mentioned a little black book until, I want to say 1980 something, when, what was the first, might have been maybe even 90s, I'm thinking. First time I heard about it was the Geraldo interview. Now, did he talk about it before then? I don't think so. So when was the Geraldo? 88? So I think 1988 is the first I heard of it, I guess, whenever the Geraldo interview was. He never mentioned this black book before then. Did he ever mention it in the Tom Snyder interview? I don't think so. So Manson didn't mention.
Good, though. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, what'd you say?
That interview with Tom Snyder, that was a good one, though.
Yeah, it was. It really was. But I don't think he didn't mention the little black book in that interview. So Manson doesn't mention this little black book until 1988 with Geraldo. Why? Why doesn't he mention it up until then? That's like 20 years later after the murders that he first mentions this little black book. So he talks about it through, I think, Geraldo. I think he mentions it. Does he mention it? I think in the Reagan Jr. maybe?
Yeah.
There's a couple other interviews that he mentions this black book in the 90s. Okay. Then, after that series of 90s interviews, the early 90s, he doesn't mention this little black book ever again. So I'm under the impression that the little black book is kind of like a red herring. I think he's just talking shit, Charlie is, about the little black book. Or he's confusing it with another black book or something. Or he's conflating it with another story or something. But I don't think I don't think Lino LaBianca was killed over a little black book.
So, in response to that, I think that this is a very important question that wouldn't be so much focused on the motive for the murders, but rather how people see Charles Manson in the media. And I'm the author of the novel Killer on a White Horse, which is now available on YouTube for free in audiobook version. I recommend people use that one. You don't even have to go to Amazon.com. I'm going to take those things down. And there's a character that's based on Charles Manson in there, and people are having these debates about, well, is he actually making sense, or is he just talking in circles? And because that's the real stuff that you see when people see Charles Manson on screen. Like, they are saying, okay, this guy's just making up a giant web of silly lies. Like, he is literally just talking in circles in his floaty sing-song kind of way. And then there are other people who are like, no, Charlie said he would never lie to you. He says he always tells you the truth. And they're like, he's actually making sense if you pay attention closely enough. What is your take on the subject?
Well, I know Charles Manson talks in metaphors a lot, and I think sometimes he does give some nuggets of truth there, some hints, and I also think he bullshits a lot as well. I think he plays up to the camera sometimes. I think it's all he's got. So, but I do think if you listen to some of his things, he does tell what he does know. See, that's the thing about this, Ned. Manson ain't gonna tell much because he don't know much. I don't think Manson was involved in this shit. I really don't. I think this was just something that the girls took upon themselves. And Texas already had plans to go up to Cielo that night. And they met in the middle. They had two things that they wanted to accomplish, and they met in the middle. Tex and the girls. Like, I don't think Charlie really knew about this shit. I don't think he really knew the extent of what was going on. So, remember, Charlie wasn't even there that day that Bobby called. He wasn't there until he didn't get into later that afternoon. He was gone all week. So, anything that transpired at the ranch that week, I don't think Manson was even aware of. Phone calls or Watson and his drug deals or whatever else was going on. I don't think Manson was even aware of it. I think maybe later on, after the fact, he was apparently. Maybe during the day they came and told him, "Yeah, man, we're gonna have to do some shit here, Charlie. We're gonna fucking get Bobby out of jail. He called this morning, and we got to get him out of jail. And we're gonna do the murder. We're gonna do a copycat murder." Manson probably said, "Well, y'all do what you got to do." If that even. Like, I really don't think he even was aware of the details of what was going on. I think he had his own things to worry about with the Hinman murder and the bikers coming down on him, and a lot of other issues. I don't think he was even into this thing with the girls and Tex until after it happened.
Right. So let's focus on that for a second, because as you said, there's the murder of Gary Hinman, and Gary Hinman might have
that was the catapult. That was the catapult for the whole thing. If the Gary Hinman murder doesn't happen, none of this happens. None of it. There's no Helter Skelter race war shit. None of this happens without the murder of Gary Hinman. That was a catapult. That was a catapult for this.
Right, but the issue is that Gary Hinman was supposed to procure a batch of mescaline that was supposed to be sold to a motorcycle gang, the Straight Satans, and he botched it more or less, and the guys from the biker gang got sick, and then they were retaliating against Charles Manson. And again, this is the story that I heard. I don't even remember where, but someone actually had a sword that was almost like a Confederate sword from the Civil War style, and the bikers snapped it over his knee, the way that they would do for a disgraced officer in the Civil War, and he handed that to Charles Manson. And Charles Manson actually used the fragment of the sword to cut Gary Hinman on the ear. But that's because of the botched drug deal. Now, again, this is the part that everyone has heard before. That's one issue. Bobby Beausoleil is in jail. Number two, that Charles Manson was involved with the shooting of an individual named Bernard Crow, lots of papa, right? And that he thought that either he thought that he had killed him, or he thought that he was going to receive blowback and retaliation from the Black Panthers. And one of the
Sure.
reasons why he orchestrated the Tate LaBianca murders was to blame it on African Americans. And I mean, I don't even like saying this stuff out loud, but they ate watermelon at one of the crime scenes and left the watermelon rinds behind so that they would think that
Where
black
was
people.
this?
What's that?
Where was this at?
Oh, I don't remember where I heard that one.
No, I
Was
mean,
it
what
LaBianca's the
what
LaBianca
crime
house?
scene? Yeah, that's not
LaBianca.
true. Not true.
That sounds ridiculous, right? I mean, I don't
It's not
remember.
even. It's not even true. They took milk and cheese from the LaBiancas. They didn't. There was no watermelon.
Was that the reason though to blame it on African Americans? So they would again, like there's so number one, they get
No, it was the Bob. So let's go back.
yeah.
Charles Manson. All right. So it all started like this. Let's just go back to the very beginning here. We can probably get everything involved in this. So here's how the big picture looks. Before any of this happened, they were at the ranch. Manson was, they were in full swing at the ranch at this time, Ned. I mean, they had everything going their way. They had stole credit cards. They had stolen cars that they were turning into dune buggies. I mean, they were building whatever they were building. All right. Charlie was right on. He had everything going his way, except that it was getting out of control. Cops were coming by the ranch all the time. They were telling him to turn down the music. Charlie had started this Helter Skelter bar that he had opened up there, kind of like an underground little nightclub, if you will. And the bikers and the girls were participating, and they would bring friends by and they would play music all night. And the cops would come by and complain, and the cops were complaining to George Spahn, and a lot of heat coming down on Charlie for a lot of things at that time with the ranch. Charlie was getting fed up with it, and he wanted to get out of there. Where did he want to go? To Barker's at the Barker's Ranch in the desert. Okay. So in order to do this, he's getting supplies together. He's getting, gasolines, canned goods, whatever, everything. He's getting dune buggies are being made. He's getting ready for the big move to the ranch out in the desert because he's getting tired of what's going on at the Spahn Ranch and the police and everything. Okay, that's happening. That's really going on. That's for real. Okay. So as he's getting all this stuff together, Manson's putting pressure on the family to start bringing in some money because they got to get supplies together and get ready for this move. So on this one particular day, he goes to Tex Watson, and Charlie Manson said to Tex, you got to do something, man, to bring some money in. Let's, we need to get our stuff together. Let's get this together. Let's get out of here. Like, you got to bring some money in. Do something. Like, go out and rob some places or something. Do what you do. Rob some drug dealers. Do whatever you do. Bring some money in. So Tex comes up with this idea to rob his old girlfriend, Rosina Kroner. So he calls up Rosina Kroner and he says, hey, look, I can get a good deal on some pot right now, but I need $5,000 or $2,500, I think it was. I need $2,500 up front. If we can get the money up front, we can buy all this pot, pay back the $2,500, and still have some extra pot for ourselves to sell. Can you get the money? Rosina said, well, I think I can. So Rosina goes to her guy, who you mentioned a minute ago, Bernard Crow, lots of papa, and she says, hey, I can get a bunch of pot, but I need the money up front. Can you loan me the money? And Bernard Crow says, oh, okay. So she calls back Tex and she says, I can do it. So Tex goes over there. They set up the deal. But Bernard wants to ride with Tex. He doesn't trust him. So they all get in the car and they head over to Tex Watson's drug dealer, supposedly. And as they get to the building, the guy wants to go in with Tex. And Tex says this in his book. He says, that's where I said, game over. It ain't happening. Nobody can go in with me. He doesn't know anybody. And he thought that was going to be the end of it. But nope. Bernard Crow says, okay, here. We'll wait here in the car. So gives Tex Watson the money, $2,500, to go in and purchase his drugs. this dope and come back out. Instead, Tex goes in the front door, out the back door where TJ, you know TJ, right? TJ was waiting for him. And he got in the car and they went back to the ranch. And they were counting out the money, supposedly, when Bernard Crow called the ranch. And he said, I'm going to come down there and burn the whole ranch down unless you give me my money back. Well, Manson said, hold on, before you come here, I'll come to you. So he went to Bernard Crow. He took TJ with him and a gun, that 22 bunt pistol that was used in the Tate murders, that same gun, Manson took with him to confront Bernard Crow. And they got there. TJ chickened out. Manson took the gun. Allegedly, Bernard Crow advanced on Charlie, and Charlie shot him. And you're right. He may have thought he killed him. But he did know one thing. Kill him or not, there's going to be some retribution. There's going to be some retaliation, some blowback. And that's what Charlie prepared for. So while he was preparing for the blowback and whatnot, Bobby Beausoleil, trying to impress the bikers, set them up with a drug deal of mescaline, as you pointed out earlier, Ned, that was going to come from his buddy, his friend, Gary Hinman. Now, Gary Hinman was not a drug dealer. He cooked a little stuff up for personal use, for himself, for some friends. And Bobby was going to him to get 1,000 hits of mescaline to sell to the bikers, which he did. And the bikers came back and said the shit was bad. It made us all sick. So go get our money back. And as Bobby Beausoleil went over to Gary Hinman to get his money back, instead, Gary refused or couldn't, and Bobby ended up killing him. During that, and this took about 2 days, by the way. They had him over there in his house, pinned in there for about 2 days. During that 2 days, there was a fight between Bobby Beausoleil and Gary Hinman. Gary Hinman actually got possession of the gun at one point that Bobby had brought over there. And the girls called the ranch and said, Bobby's got the gun. Gary's got the gun. And Manson, freaking out because he thought maybe the girls were in trouble, or maybe, who knows. Manson took it upon himself at that point to come over there with the sword that you're talking about, the saber, and he sliced Gary in the ear the second that he came barging through the door. By all accounts, Manson came through that door and didn't even ask questions. He went and swung and clipped Gary, or cut Gary in the ear, damn near taking his whole ear off, actually. Pretty bad clip. In fact, the autopsy report says that blow in itself could have been fatal to Gary Hinman. So that's how bad of a cut that was. But he cuts Gary, and then he leaves. Charlie does. And Bobby and the girls stay there with Gary until Bobby ended up killing him. And the girls apparently even put the pillow over his face to kind of suffocate him. And it was a pretty nasty, nasty murder. But that's what happened with the Gary Hinman murder. And when he went back and told Charlie what happened, Manson took that opportunity to frame the Black Panthers, because they went back in. Bobby put a paw print on the wall in blood, I believe, to try and frame the Black Panthers for the murder of Gary Hinman. And that's, of course, that went on, that happened. And then, as you said, the bikers, the Straight Satans, came to the ranch and told Charlie, and this is 86 George, the president of the biker club. He told Charlie, we better not be implicated in any murder either. And he, as you said, broke the sword and left. And the funny thing, I was laughing earlier. I wasn't laughing at the murdering of Gary with the sword. I was laughing at that story that you were mentioning, because he did break that sword in half, did 86 George. And Manson, who loved that sword for some reason, Manson took the broken end of the sword with the handle, and he filed that thing down and made like a little mini sword out of that sword that was broken. So I kind of was laughing at that when you mentioned that earlier. But that's the backstory of the Bernard Crowe shooting and the Gary Hinman, and how it came to be framed as the Black Panthers being responsible. Charlie was trying to put the blame on the Black Panthers to get Bobby out of trouble of the murder. Again, blaming it through the paw print on the wall. And Charlie told a couple people, he gave the microbus, Gary's microbus to, if you get pulled over by the police, tell them that a black man in a beret sold it to you, meaning one of the Black Panthers. So that's kind of the setup of the whole thing right there. And I still believe that if the Gary Hinman murder hadn't happened, I don't think we would have the TLB murder. But at the same time, we do. I think the whole thing should be called the Hinman Tate LaBianca murders, is what it should be called, because that's where it starts, at least in my opinion.
And to clarify, though, when there's this incident where 86 George broke the sword, did that happen before or after the murder of Gary Hinman?
That was after.
Okay. So
that
Charles
was after the murder.
Gary Hinman with the complete sword.
That's why he broke the sword, because he knew Charlie had used that sword to cut Gary. And that's why he was telling Charlie, and we better not be implicated in any damn murder either. And he broke the sword. And then, Charlie took that little end with the handle and he filed that thing down to where he had like a little mini sword.
And do you think there's any evidence that would suggest that the Tate LaBianca murders were meant to have been blamed on the Black Panthers, or that actually was the agenda to frame the Black Panthers for the Tate LaBianca murders?
I don't think it was to frame the Black Panthers for the Tate LaBianca murders. I do think he was trying to frame the Black Panthers for the Hinman murders. Yes. I don't think he had anything to do with the Tate LaBianca murders. I'm telling you, he didn't order those murders, in my opinion. I don't see the evidence that he did. Just because Paul Watkins says, "Oh yeah, that was Charlie. Yeah, I liked all that Helter Skelter shit," that doesn't mean anything to me. Charles, let me tell you something. Now, I don't like to talk about dead people too much, but Charles Watkins, he was Paul Watkins. I'm sorry.
Oh yes, of course, Paul Watkins.
Yes, I'm sorry, dude. Look, I've been doing this so long, I forget half the stuff that I knew. But Paul Watkins, in my opinion, he wanted to be Charlie. He was so jealous of Charlie, he couldn't stand it, in my opinion. And look what happened the minute that Charlie got locked up for these murders. Paul Watkins comes bouncing back to the ranch like he's the savior. And he tried to take Charlie Manson's spot with the girls and everything. So I don't have a lot of respect for Paul Watkins. I think he's a weasel. And I think a lot of the shit he said was bullshit. And a lot of the stuff that he got was from the church across the street, the Fountain of the World, on his own, that he brought to the ranch. So I think he was more of a weasel than any of them, really, almost. But I digress. Where are we at now? I'm sorry, Ned. Go ahead. Next.
So as far as Paul Watkins goes, some people would view him as Charles Manson's right-hand man, and then more famously there's Tex Watson. But there's another individual that we haven't talked about too much, and his name is Bruce Davis. If you were to Google him, you'd probably find that Bruce Davis was listed as Charles Manson's right-hand man. But every Monday, I do a segment about the Zodiac Killer here on BBOR, and Bruce Davis is also a Zodiac Killer suspect. And actually, Brian, the first episode I ever heard from the Tate LaBianca radio program was you interviewing Howard Davis about his Zodiac suspect. No relation to the last name, but
right.
Firstly, what do you think of this Zodiac Manson connection?
I don't see anything there, but hell, I don't know. I can't say yay or nay on that. I've looked at the Zodiac case a little bit myself. admittedly, I'm not as versed in that as I am this one, or any other case for that matter. But I have looked at that case. I don't see any evidence that Charles Manson was involved. Could Bruce be involved in it? Maybe. I don't know that he was the Zodiac, but who knows? Maybe he was involved in it. Maybe, I don't know. To answer your question, I can't say for sure. I don't see any evidence that Manson was involved in any type of the Zodiac murders. But Bruce, I don't know. There's not much about Bruce really out there. He was from Mobile, Alabama, I think, and or somewhere out there in Alabama. I think he got a little college education, but I don't know much about him other than his time at the family.
Right, and that was my next question, because we hear that Bruce Davis is Charles Manson's right-hand man, but then we also hear that he's going all over the world. Like, he goes on like a trip to England and then continental, possibly even North Africa. And I read once that he was doing that to spread Charlie's message, but I didn't really quite comprehend that. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, no, you're right about the England thing. There's some speculation that he was responsible for Joel, having a blank here again.
Is that another crime?
Sandy Good's ex-boyfriend or husband. Anyway, he was found dead, and they thought maybe Bruce Davis had something to do with that, but it was ruled a suicide. And I don't think Bruce had anything to do with it. If Bruce was over anywhere spreading Charlie's message, I have to believe that was all on Bruce. I don't know that. I mean, what message was Charlie even spreading? There was no message. Like, I don't think there was a. Go ahead.
No, he's gone for a considerable amount of time. He leaves in the fall of 1968, and according to Bruce's testimony, he doesn't return until the spring of 1969. So we're talking 4, 5, 6 months he's away from everybody, and he's just out of the country. And to me, that doesn't exactly sound like Charles Manson's right-hand man if he's not there. But, I mean, he's a bizarre character.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He is a bizarre character in this thing. And he's one of the older people, too. He's around Charlie's age, whereas a lot of these people were younger. But,
was Bruce Davis really Charles Manson's right-hand man?
Joel Pugh was the guy's name. Joel Pugh. I couldn't think of his name, but Joel Pugh, who was Sandy Good's ex-husband, I believe. And I believe they were married back in 67 or something like that. Anyway, though, so I don't know. I don't think Bruce killed him. I think it was suicide like they ruled, but who knows? Who really knows? But no, Bruce is definitely as far as right-hand man, I don't think there was a right-hand man. They all appoint themselves the right-hand man, I think. They say that. They say that, not Manson. Right. You know what I mean? Like they all appoint themselves the right-hand man.
Oh, absolutely.
Tex Watson, yeah. So I think
but also, that goes into something, though, that I'd really like to ask you about, and that is that Charles Manson publicly said that there was no cult that people are talking about. The Manson family was not a cult. The reason why they're called the family is it was a musical act. They were called the Family Jams, and everybody on the ranch participated in the music act. That's why it's called the family. So that wouldn't even really have anything to do with the leader or the right-hand man. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Shit. I honestly have to disagree with that. I think there was the family. I think they probably did call themselves the family, much like any loose-knitted group of people would do, probably refer to themselves as hey, we're a family. We're the family, a family, whatever. I don't think it was just a musical act. No, I don't think that. No, I just don't. I think it was, I think they were just the family. And I don't think it was anything criminal at it either. Okay. I don't think it was a cult. Let me ask you something before. Let's ask the listeners this question out there as far as a cult goes there at the ranch. So at this ranch, Spawn Ranch, it's not just the family. It's not just Manson and the family living there. You've got ranchers living there. George Spahn lives in the main house. At that time, you had the public that would come in on the weekends for pony rides. They were doing business there. If there were a cult going on at that ranch, don't you think somebody would have noticed? Don't you think somebody would have said, man, they're doing some weird stuff there in the back? Don't you think it would have gotten out at some point? Somebody would have figured it out?
Well, wait a second. To answer your question, it doesn't necessarily have to be a ritualistic cult. It could just be that Charlie is at the top and he's giving out the orders, and then people are following him. And he's
orders for what? Orders for what?
Well,
to get pony rides? Orders for what? To do chores around the ranch? Hey, go clean the horse barn. What is that?
To participate in sexually related activities.
You don't need to be a cult to do that, do you?
Well, I mean, no, but Paul Watkins did say, though, he had done everything on Earth that a man could do except have sex with Squeaky. So, I mean,
yeah,
that's what I think he was all about. Okay. That's what I think he was all about. That was his problem. He didn't get to do that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Not even joking. I'm not even joking.
No, I think you're right. I'm not.
Envy.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. No, I just don't see the cult aspect of it there like that. I think, everybody was into their thing with Charlie, of course, but I mean, I don't know what constitutes a cult. Like when I think of a cult, I think of something like the Branch Davidians or something, or the Jones guy, right? Like that, yeah. The Jonestown thing. That's a cult. That's not what was going on at Spawn Ranch. And as far as the brainwashing thing, let me say this too. Those girls weren't brainwashed. They were already fucked in the head. And I submit this to you for evidence. You heard of the Hawthorne shootout, I'm sure, right?
I'm drawing a blank, actually.
Okay. So when Charlie was locked up, when they arrested him for these murders, there was an influx of activity at the ranch. People were coming and going because of the notoriety they were receiving. One of those people that came was a guy named Dennis Rice. And Dennis Rice convinced the girls to help him pull off what they called the Hawthorne shootout. They went to a surplus goods store in Hawthorne, California. They tried to rob the place, and they got into a shootout with the cops called the Hawthorne shootout. Supposedly, the plan was to rob the Hawthorne, the surplus store and some other places, and then hijack. They were going to hijack a 747 and try to get Charlie out of jail, which sounds completely ridiculous. My point in all of this, Ned, is that these girls were already fucked in the head. Like they would listen to anybody. I don't think Charlie was brainwashing them. I think they were just that stupid. Because if Dennis Rice can come into the family after the murders and talk them into doing the Hawthorne shootout, regardless of what the purpose was, I think that goes to show you their vulnerability right there. Like anybody could get into their heads. You don't have to brainwash them. They're pretty easy, in my opinion.
But what do you think about the women and how they were presenting themselves at the trial, walking in the hallways and singing and just like coloring with crayons during like the proceedings and all of these things? What do you think that was? Do you think that they were putting on an act? Do you think they actually were out of their minds? Or do you think it's something else?
Man, I have to think they were putting on an act. Although, I got to ask, man, if you're a normal person, which you seem to be, Ned, how would you feel if you did something out of character, completely something you never thought you would do, and you ended up participating in 2 nights of murder, and you killed 7, 8 people, 9 people, whatever the count was? I mean, how would you feel? I'd probably freak out too and act a little weird in court and out of my normal persona. But I don't know. I still think they were kind of putting on an act, but was the act out of genuine crazy, like they couldn't believe what they did? Or was it just, hey, fuck you, we don't care, and they're just trying to, put on an act for the hell of it? I don't know, because I've never been in that situation.
Right. You're asking me like to imagine, but I'm really not sure
Same here.
respond to that?
Yeah, same here. Same here. I can't imagine it either, so I don't know what was really going on in their heads. But they seemed to straighten up after the trial when they found out they could all have a chance for parole. That's for sure.
Right, because they were facing the death penalty, right?
Yeah, and actually they faced it, and they got sentenced to it, and then of course the death penalty was repealed a year later or something like that.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. So after that, they all straightened up. They all straightened up and decided to tell the official narrative, so in hopes of possibly getting parole one day. And it worked because, as you know, Leslie Van Houten is out now. So obviously
50
it worked.
years, though, right? I mean, was it 50? It took 53 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, though,
Yep.
about that. I mean, I've heard you talk about this on the radio show, and I think it's a very good observation because I noticed this when I would watch interviews with the Manson girls, and what they say is that I take full responsibility for my actions. The court needs to hold me accountable, except it was all Charlie's fault, and it was all because of the drugs. And do you agree or disagree with that? I know what your answer is, but...
Yeah, no, I disagree. Yep. Totally disagree with that. I mean, this is what they're going to say now. And number two, most parole boards, the first thing they tell you is, we only accept the official narrative, the official verdict in court. That's what they accept in the parole hearing. So if you go in there and you try to go off that and say, well, I didn't really do it. They found me guilty, but I really was innocent. You're not going to get parole because you can't even come to terms with the reality that you were found guilty. So that's why they do that, I think, is that they tell the official narrative in these parole hearings because they think they're going to get out one day. And now they've been proven right. Yeah, it took 53 years, but by God, she's out. Okay, so it worked. It worked. Whatever they told, it worked. You know, the sticking with the narrative of Charlie made me do it. It worked. Not the truth, but I think it worked.
Okay, though, but then there's another challenge question. Leslie Van Houten has been paroled and let out. Should Patricia Krenwinkel get out?
Oh, hell, all of them should now.
They should.
Hell, yeah, let Tex out now. I mean, why not? No, look, none of them should get out, okay? None of them should get out. None of them. Nobody ever convicted of first-degree murder should get out, ever.
Not even Leslie?
Because, no, not even Leslie, no. And we've done some research where we've proven her, you know, she likes to claim, oh, I stabbed a dead body, whatever. 16 times you stabbed that body. And how do we know she was dead already? And then there's other parts of the testimony in court that came out in transcripts where I don't think it was Rosemary dead before Leslie stabbed her. I think Rosemary was alive. There's Leslie's own words in the court transcripts. They talk about when Rosemary went back into the bedroom. They took Rosemary back into the bedroom while Tex was killing Mr. LaBianca out in the living room. And what happened was Rosemary began to fight the two girls, Leslie and Patricia Krenwinkel. She started to swing a lamp at them. And Leslie, in her testimony, says that at that point, that's when her and Patricia got on top of, started jumping on Rosemary because she's swinging a lamp at them. Of course, Rosemary's got a pillowcase on her head, so she can't even see where she's swinging. She's just swinging wildly. And they subdued her. And Leslie says, in her own words at that point, we started cutting the lady up. Right there. They didn't even wait. So if that's true, if what Leslie is saying right there in that testimony, then they were already cutting up Mrs. LaBianca well before she was dead. And even if that's not true, even if Leslie is lying about that, those 16 post-mortem shots aren't all post-mortem. So I don't even think Rosemary was dead. Oh, and here's some more stuff. In the police report, Ned, they tell how Rosemary LaBianca had pulled herself across the carpet after she was stabbed. This is while they were out there in the living room. Tex was taking a shower, and they were getting milk and cheese out of the refrigerator. Rosemary was still alive in the bedroom, pulling herself across the carpet to a spot where she ended up, dying eventually. But at that point, she was still alive. So no, Leslie Van Houten should have never been let out. Never. But if you're going to let Leslie out, why not let the rest of them out then? Is my point.
Well,
I don't know how do you split hairs there, man? How do you split hairs in that situation? How do you say, okay, Leslie Van Houten, you're okay to release, but you know what, Pat Krenwinkel, not you.
Right, and the thing I wanted to say was that out of all the episodes of the Tate LaBianca radio program that I've listened to, I think that was the one that stood out to me the most when you and your co-host, Tana Laufenberg, were talking about how there was this discovery, which I've only heard from you two, that Leslie Van Houten admitted to stabbing Rosemary LaBianca while she was still alive, because absolutely everything, even her Wikipedia page stated that she stabbed Rosemary LaBianca post-mortem. And Stephanie Harlow was also someone who pointed out that, well, was she checking her vital signs? I mean, is she a medical doctor? How did she know with certainty that Rosemary was dead when she was stabbing her? And I mean, like, I think that that's a reasonable observation in this particular case.
I've always asked that question. How in the hell would those fucking idiots in that house that night, how in the hell would they know if Rosemary is dead or not? Do you really think that they actually stopped in the middle of that shit and checked her pulse? No. They didn't know. Just because the lady wasn't moving, Leslie's gonna say, oh, she must have been dead. No, I'm not buying it. No. And I don't think she was dead. I know she wasn't, in fact. I know she wasn't. So yeah, and here's the thing, you're not gonna know that stuff because not you, but most people wouldn't know that stuff because they've never read the transcripts of the trial. And all of this came out in the transcripts and testimony. Leslie herself, the information you mentioned just now between me and Tana, we got that from her own words, her own testimony. So, it's not like we're making this stuff up. It's just stuff that we're discovering. And I might say for years and years, probably not up until the internet, we've never seen the transcripts of this trial. We've never seen the police report. It wasn't out there. And the FOIA request wasn't expanded until 1995 or so. So most of the public had no way of looking at the actual facts or the actual, testimony of the case until at least 2000 and whatever, after the internet came out. And even then, it wasn't out there like it is today. Like nowadays, you can literally type in Google Tate LaBianca police report and it'll come up. You can get it. Back when I was getting into this case, you couldn't do that. It wasn't out there that available. You had to know somebody that might have it, that would email it to you or something. Like it wasn't available like it is now. So we've got a lot more resources now that are available to make these little discoveries. And so then you got to find somebody that's got the time and patience to wade through all of that shit and read all of that shit to find out what's in it. And that's where my co-host, Tana Laufenberg, comes in. She's phenomenal with that kind of task. And I don't think anybody knows more about these transcripts than her. I wish she could have been on with us today, but when we started, it was a little early for California time, which is where Tana's at. So she said she might have to sit this one out. But I promise you, maybe if we do a part 2 to this one day, Ned, I'll make sure she joins us, and you'll get a whole nother insight to this thing through her and what she's found in the trial transcripts.
That would be amazing. And right now, Brian, I would like to give you the floor and say you can use this as an opportunity to have a final send-off. Share anything you would like with the listeners of Black Box Online Radio. Is there anything that you would like to promote, anything currently in the works, and any concluding thoughts about our discussion today? So the floor is yours.
Well, I just want to say, if I could take a moment and go through what I think really went down those 2 nights. And maybe it makes sense, and maybe I sound like I'm crazier than a bed bug. But here's the way it went down, in my opinion. I think through Tex Watson knowing Eugene Massaro, and Eugene Massaro being the crime partner of Joe Rostow, who allegedly was up there that night delivering drugs. And Bobby Beausoleil calling the ranch that Friday morning of the murders, and the girls coming up with the idea of a copycat murder. I think they went up there that night to rob the drugs and the money that they believed were up there from Joe Rostow. And I say this because when they went into the house, Wojtek Frykowski is laying down on the couch sleeping. Jay is in the back room with Sharon. They've still got their clothes on, the clothes they went out in that night. And they were both wearing their shoes. Frykowski and Sebring, they both had their shoes on because they were waiting for somebody. Why was Jay Sebring even there at that hour? Because they were waiting for somebody. They were waiting for Joe Rostow to come back with the drugs. That's why they were up that night at that hour, still in their clothes and still with their shoes on. They were waiting for the drug deal to come back, the drug dealer, Joe Rostow, to bring the rest of the drugs back. Wojtek fell asleep. So Tex Watson and the crew comes in thinking there's a drug deal either had gone down and the money was there and the drugs were there and they were going to go in there and get it and rob it and probably kill some people for the copycat murder. When they got there, I think Tex snapped because he was being lied to. Because I'm sure when he got in there, he said, "Where's the money? Where's the drugs?" And I think probably Jay Sebring said something like, "We're still waiting for the guy to show up. We don't have it here." And I think Tex thought that maybe Jay was lying to him. And he got enraged. And they got into a fight. And everybody tried to make a break for it. And once that started, well, they just said, fuck it, and the murdering started. So you got that chaos there at the Tate house that night. They come back. They tell Charlie what happened. Charlie's like, what? And everybody knows this is what Charlie said. It's been out there for years. You did what? You just put me back in prison, is what he told Susan when he found out what they had done. Now, Charlie, liking these people because, he did have an affectionate spot for these wayward misfits of society, these freaks. They were his friends. So he was going to help them. But at the same time, Charlie had a lot of shit coming down on him. He was still being held responsible for the money that Bobby Beausoleil owed the bikers for the bad drugs from Gary Hinman. So, and Charlie had to get the girls out of jail because Sandy and Mary had gotten locked up that day because of some credit card shit at Sears. So they were in jail. Charlie had to get him out. And on top of it all, Charlie was worried that Bobby was going to start talking. So Charlie had to get money to get Bobby an attorney so that maybe Bobby would calm down and quit talking. All of that was on Charlie's head. So did Charlie go to Tex that night and tell him to go up to Cielo and kill everybody? Or does it make more sense that Charlie went to Tex that night and said, "Listen, I need you to go out tonight and rob some houses, man. We need to bring some money in. The girls are in jail. The straight Satans still want their money for the drug deal. And I got to find Bobby an attorney so that he won't start talking about the Hinman murder. So Tex, I need you to go out and I need you to rob some places tonight and bring back some money, my man. That's what I need you to do." Tex said, "Okay, Charlie, I'll do that." But at the same time, Tex was going out with the girls to do a copycat murder and rob a drug dealer. But he didn't probably tell Charlie that part. So he told Charlie he would go out and rob some places and bring the money back. Instead, he went out and they executed the copycat murder, supposedly, and he didn't get anything. There was no drug deal. There was no money. There was nothing. And Tex didn't bring back any money from robbing anybody either. So nothing went right that night. So the next night, Charlie says, "I'm going to take you all out and show you how it's done." And everybody took that to mean Charlie's going to go out and show everybody how to murder somebody without it being so messy or whatever he termed it, or make them panic. That's what they said. Charlie was going to show them how to do it. Well, maybe Charlie was just going to show them how to rob places and bring in some money. Maybe that's all he was going to show them, because that's exactly what they sounded like they did to me. That next night that they went out, they drove around for hours. And they stopped at a church they were going to rob. I'm sorry, they were going to kill the guy in the church for some reason. Yeah. For, the name of Helter Skelter. Because Charlie didn't really have all those problems I just listed. It was all in his own head, right? No, they were real problems. They were really happening. So Charlie is trying to, in other words, the number one thing on Charlie Manson's mind that weekend was money, not dead bodies. Money is what was going to help Charlie, not dead bodies. It makes no sense to kill people. Charlie needed robbery. He needed money. So I think he's going out the next night to show these motherfuckers how to rob places without killing people. So they're going around all night, driving around, and they're casing places over. Now, the Bug and the witnesses are terming it as, no, we were going out to murder people that night. I don't see any evidence of that. I see nothing that shows they were going to try to murder anybody until they got to the LaBiancas. And again, there's Tex Watson. So let's go back again. They're riding around all night looking for, I think, places to rob. I don't think they're looking for anywhere to murder. I think they're looking for robberies. They don't find anywhere, or do they? I don't know. Maybe they did. But after about 3 or 4 hours of this shit, they decide, let's get back. Let's go. Well, they get into a fight. And this came out in the court transcripts. There was a fight in the car between Linda Caban and Charles Manson, an argument, a major fight, like a big argument. Like it was loud, supposedly. I don't know what the fight was about. That didn't come out in the transcripts. But there was a fight in the car, an argument between Charlie and Linda Caban right before they went to Waverly. Now, something we didn't mention, there's a person that lives next to the LaBiancas, or did. His name was Harold True. Harold True was a party guy, had a lot of parties at his house, did a lot of drugs, and he was a friend, or he knew Charlie. He also knew, independently of Charlie, he also knew Linda Caban. What are the odds? Isn't that crazy? So, there is speculation on my part anyway that says that fight in the car that night between Linda and Charlie was over Harold True. Because Linda had been to Harold True's house before to buy drugs. So, the only thing about the Harold True thing is Charlie knew Harold True didn't live there anymore. And that, I think, is what the fight was about. I think the argument in the car was Linda wanted to go to Waverly to Harold True's house to get some drugs since they were done for the night. Charlie was arguing, saying, no, we ain't going there because Harold True doesn't live there anymore. And as the argument persisted, I think they just said, fuck it, let's go. I'm going to prove to you he doesn't live there anymore. So they go over to Waverly, and just as Charlie said, Harold True's house was vacant because he had moved out. He didn't live there anymore. So, as they're walking down the driveway back to the car from Harold True's, I believe, this is my own speculation, I believe Charlie Manson looked over next door and saw lights on and cars in the driveway. Now, a little backstory. The whole time Harold True lived there in that house, the LaBianca house was empty. Nobody lived in that house. Manson has said many times that partying over at the True house, instead of going home, Manson would go over to the empty LaBianca house and crash there. So he knew that house. He knew the layout of that house. So on this particular night that they are over at Harold True's house, and Harold True doesn't live there anymore, I think Manson looks over and sees that there's lights on at that empty house that he used to crash at. And I think he can tell people live there now. And I think, in my opinion, Charlie said, you know what? Let's make this not for nothing tonight. let's go rob that house. Because I know that house. I used to crash there. I know the layout of that house. Let's go rob that house. At least we can come away with something for this night. Because we've been driving around all night and we haven't gotten anywhere. We haven't robbed anywhere. So I think Charlie was using the opportunity of being over at Harold True's, and he looked over and saw that that house that he used to crash in, the LaBianca house, was now somebody was living there, and he felt like he could slip in there, rob that house, and get out because he knew the house layout, and he knew that he could get in and get out. So he went in there, and let me say this. There's all this talk about Charlie went in and tied up the LaBiancas. I want to make it known, according to the police report of this case, Mrs. LaBianca was not tied up. Only Lino LaBianca was. Mrs. LaBianca had a lamp cord around her neck to keep the pillowcase that they put on her head intact. But she was not restrained. She was not tied up. So to think that Manson went in there and tied up Mr. LaBianca and then left and went back down to the car. Now, I'm not a criminal, Ned, but I would never do that. I would never tie somebody up and then leave them in there, knowing that they could get out or try to make an escape or get to the phone. Anything could happen. If I'm robbing that place, I'm not going to tie him up and then leave them in there by themselves, even for the moment of going down to the car. But that's what they said that Charlie did. They said Charlie went into the house, tied up the LaBiancas, and then came back down and got Tex Watson. I don't think that happened. I think Charlie cased the place, probably looked in the windows, then went back and got Tex. Then they went inside and they tied up Mr. LaBianca. They never tied up Mrs. LaBianca. That is a fact. That's in the police report. Okay, so Charlie and them are leaving. Charlie and the crew are leaving Harold True's, or the house Harold True used to live in. They look over, and Charlie sees the LaBianca house has got lights on and the car's in the driveway or whatever, and they're going over there to rob that place. And they rob the place, and they kill the LaBiancas. Well, let's look at that for a moment. These are the facts of the case. They went inside, yes. They tied up Mr. LaBianca, yes. Charlie Manson got Rosemary's wallet. Rosemary's wallet contained credit cards. Now, we all know, right? The Manson family, that's their thing, credit cards. That's what they do. They do credit cards. They use credit cards, stolen credit cards. That's their big income. So it makes sense that Charlie would go after Rosemary's wallet for the credit cards. That's some easy money. And that's what Charlie wants, easy money right now. That's what he needs. Remember, Charlie needs money for a lot of problems he's got. So he's got Rosemary's wallet, which contained the credit cards, and he's ready to go. Notice now, he doesn't have Rosemary's purse. He's just got the wallet. That's all he needs. And he's ready to go. Except when he's ready to go, Tex doesn't want to leave yet, because Tex wants to kill Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca. Because Tex Watson is trying to cover up what he did the night before. So he wants to kill the LaBiancas. I don't think Charlie wanted to kill the LaBiancas. That's why, guess what Charlie did? Charlie left. You think it's weird? Don't you think if Charlie was in on the LaBianca murders, don't you think Charlie would have been right there with Tex, egging him on? Don't you think he would have been right there with Tex Watson going, oh, kill him, dude? And don't you think he would have stayed there and watched it? At the very least, don't you think Charlie would have stayed outside in the car waiting for Tex and the girls to come out if he was part of it? No, he didn't do that. What Manson did was he took the gun and he took the wallet and he left and he took the car because he wasn't in favor of killing the LaBiancas. He didn't want anything to do with it, so he left. He totally left. Did he know Tex was going to kill him? Sure he did. But Ned, you and I, if we knew something like that was happening, we would go to the cops and we would dial 911 and we would call the cops. Charlie is a career criminal. That's not the code of the criminal. So if you know a murder is going to happen, you don't go call the cops. You simply go another direction. You walk the other way. That's it. That's the end of it. And that's exactly what Charlie did. Manson walked the other way. He didn't partake in those murders. He didn't want anything. He left. Not only did he leave the house, he left the whole scene. He got in the car and he left because he didn't want no part of that shit. He wanted the money. So here's what happened. They got in the car. And I'm sure, I don't know verbatim, I wasn't in the car, but I can almost imagine what was going on, the conversation. I'm sure when they got in the car, Charlie took that wallet and tossed it to Linda and said, just get rid of it. We can't even use these credit cards now because Tex is going to murder these motherfuckers. And guess what? It's going to come back to the ranch. We can't use these stolen credit cards of the dead people. So they're no good to us right now. So throw them away. Get rid of them. If there's any money in the wallet, then keep the money. But there was nothing. Some change, I think. So they get to Selmar, and Linda puts does anybody really believe that Charlie told Linda to put it in a women's bathroom toilet? Does that make any sense?
Right? It's in the tank of the toilet, right? It's not like behind,
right. It's not even right. Thank you, Ned. Thank you. It's not even just in the bathroom. It's in the tank of the women's toilet. Now does that even make sense? No, it doesn't. Unless you want to hide it yourself and come back for the credit cards later, which is what I think Linda did. I don't think Charlie told her to go put that wallet in that bathroom. I think Charlie told her to throw it out the goddamn window way back in Los Angeles when they were in Waverly or wherever. I think he told her then, throw this thing out. We can't use it anymore. And instead of throwing it out, she just sat back and hid it, like sat on it until they got to Selmar. And she said, okay, I'm going to hide it here, and then I'm going to come back and get it. And I'll use the credit cards for myself. That's what I think was going on. And that's what the evidence shows me. So you got Manson, who said, you know what, Tex? I like you and everything, but we're out of here. If you're going to murder these people, we're gone. So that's what he did. He took the car, he took the gun. Now, Tex had his own weapon. Now, here's another thing. If Charlie Manson wants to order the murders of the LaBiancas and they're going up there to kill, why didn't they bring weapons? Why didn't he like the first night they brought their own knives to Cielo, right? The girls didn't even have any weapons the second night. Tex only had his own weapon that he brought with him, but the girls didn't have any weapons. They had to use the utensils in the house of the LaBiancas. They killed the LaBiancas with their own kitchen utensils, their own knives. That's not a murder. That doesn't sound like somebody ordering a murder or organizing a murder to me. So again, the LaBiancas, I would argue that Manson was there as part of a burglary. When it turned into like a murder, he wanted out of there. And that's exactly what he did. He left. No, he's not going to call 911 because he's a goddamn criminal in the underworld of criminals, okay? He's not going to do that. But he will get the fuck out of there, and that's what he did. He took the car and the gun, and he left. Now, that to me shows that Tex was on his own. He was operating, he's going in business for himself, just like he did with Cielo the night before. So they drive down from Selmar. And I think the only reason they went to Selmar was just to get away from that, as far away from that scene as possible, so that when it went down, somebody could say, yeah, but Charlie was in Selmar. He wasn't even at Waverly. So they went from Selmar, because once they got up there, they got milkshakes or whatever they got, and they took a break. And then they drove down to Venice. Why is he going to Venice, I wonder? Well, maybe he's going to Venice to pay off. Now, they'll tell you, wait a minute. They'll tell you they went to Venice to kill the actor. There's an actor guy there, Nader.
Saladin Nadir, right?
Yeah, Nadir. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, Nader Nadir. Saladin Nadir. Yes, the actor, the Lebanese actor. They'll tell you, the official story will tell you that they went to Venice that night to kill him. That's not true. They didn't even think of that guy until after they got to Venice. That's in the court transcripts. They didn't even mention that guy until after they got to Venice. So they weren't going there for that guy. But you know who else was in Venice? The Straight Satan's clubhouse was in Venice. I think Charlie was going there to give the Straight Satan some money that they felt he owed. I think that's why they were going to Venice. And then, to cap it all off, the next day, that Monday morning, Manson sent Linda down to the jail to give Bobby a message. The message was, everything's cool. Don't say anything. Everything's cool. But Linda couldn't get in because she didn't have a proper ID. So she came back and told Charlie, I couldn't get in. I didn't have an ID. Charlie said, well, try it again tomorrow. So the next day, that Tuesday, is when Linda left, but she didn't go to the jail. She just left the ranch and left for good. And that's when she left and left her kid there, and then went on to talk to her husband, and then, you know, it all came out. So that's really the story, I think, that happened. I don't think it's that deep, but it is complex. And I don't think it was MK Ultra. I don't think it was Helter Skelter. I don't think it was any of that bullshit. I think it was just simply a couple things happening at the same time, and they came together. Meaning Tex Watson wanting to rob the drug dealer up at Cielo, Joe Rostow, and the girls and Bobby wanting something to be done and come up with a copycat murder idea. Manson, I don't think, knew anything about it till after the fact. And I think that's what Charlie Manson is guilty of. Accessory after the fact. With that being said, Ned, I want everybody to know, I think Charles Manson was basically a piece of shit. I would have never hung out with him if I would have been back then in those, if I would have been there back then in those days. He wouldn't have been a friend of mine. I don't like people like him. And I'm not a Manson supporter by any means. I think the guy's funny sometimes. I think he's done and said some funny things. And while I defend the guy and his rights and what I think happened those two nights, I don't want that to be mistaken for some type of a Charlie Manson supporter. I'm not a Charlie Manson supporter. I am a supporter of justice and truth. And I am a supporter of Americans' rights to a fair trial. And I come at this case not in support of Charlie, but as against Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor, and the corrupt justice system that took place in that trial. That's what I'm against. That's where my passion is. That's what makes me come out like this, because I am so against the injustice of what happened, more so than I am, I guess, against Charles Manson ordering the murders, which I don't even think he did. I think they got the right people, but I think Charles Manson was railroaded, I guess, so to speak. I guess, and that's what I got a little upset at. Because if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody out there, right? I mean, any of us can be susceptible to it. In fact, it's going on today, right now. Look what they're doing to Donald Trump. I'm not even a Donald Trump supporter. But if you can't tell what the fuck is going on out there today with this presidential election, then you're blind. They do not want Donald Trump back in that White House. They're going to do anything they can to prevent that. Just like Bugliosi was going to do everything he could to get Charlie Manson convicted on this conspiracy shit. Because it goes deeper than just, oh, here's a here's a hippie who is brainwashing his people. It goes beyond that because we didn't even talk about the Nixon and the Manson guilty thing and the whole, like, what's the purpose of framing Charlie, right? Maybe that can be a topic for our next discussion, Ned. Why would they do this, Brian? Why would they frame Charlie like this? Why would they have it out for some no-name hippie? I got an answer for that too. So
I do as well. I could throw some things together real fast as well, but please continue.
Yeah. I just think that there's a lot more into this, even though the crimes aren't as deep as they are being portrayed, but the depth of this goes to the layers outside of the crime itself. For example, the motive of the whole thing to get Charlie was because the attorney general at that time, oh my God, it's so crazy. The attorney general at the time was trying to help President Nixon because President Nixon's problems were coming from the subculture. I call it subculture. The underground, the hippies, the anti-establishment people, all right? Because President Nixon, a lot of his presidential campaign, a lot of his presidential foreign policy was the Vietnam War. And they were against the Vietnam War, the hippies and the peace movement, those type of people. They were all against Nixon and the counterculture. They were against Nixon in the Vietnam War. They were doing. Look back at the history back then, Ned, and the video clips, the news clips. You'll see all these protests going on from the counterculture back then. They were a big pain in the ass for Nixon. So what they had to do was they had to show that these hippies were bad people. They had to prove to society that these counterculture people were bad, evil people. And that's what they were using Charlie Manson for, in my opinion. They were trying to make him the symbol of all the counterculture so that they could continue on with their war against Vietnam or in Vietnam. That was the big motive of all to get Charlie. But really, and I'm not, again, Charlie supporter, but the guy was guilty of accessory after the fact, in my opinion, is the most they got on him. And that's what the evidence, that's just using evidence that we got. So, but I just wanted to make all that clear that that's what I think really happened. And I think that, I don't know, I think that the prosecutor was a bigger criminal than Manson ever was.
And that is a very defendable claim. But for now, I'll say, Brian Davis, thank you so much.
Ned, it's been a pleasure, my friend. I hope to talk to you again in the future, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you. You too.